Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Fraud Watch Friday. I'm Bruce Carlson with the AARP Washington State Office. And with me, as always, is Kate Tomlinson, who's going to be doing our presentation and answering questions this morning. Hi, Kay. How's things going with you today?
Going very well, very well. I'm ready for the sun to come back, though. I know we've got someone from California with us. If you could just send a little bit up north, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm heading over to the Tri-Cities this afternoon to visit some friends there, and even there it's cloudy and kind of cool. So we're taking a trip across the mountains to get some sun, but I guess we're not going to get any.
No.
But welcome to everyone. This is our monthly Fraud Watch Friday online event, and this is your event as well as ours. So if you have um, questions that you want to ask that are not to do with the topic, you can either put them in now or you can wait until we talk about our opening topic a little bit. But we would love to get your questions in the comments. I also want to acknowledge um, Dan, who contacted us over email to volunteer for the Fraud Watch Network. Definitely appreciate that.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. And if you'd like to get involved in fighting fraud with ARP, we would love to have you. And I'll give that information at the end as well. But if you'd like to send us an email at ARPWA, that's ARPWA at AARP.org, we would love to get you involved in the fight against fraud. We need all our volunteers. We need volunteers around the state too in different areas. So Dan, thank you for answering the call. Really appreciate it. And we've had some other people sign up after previous Fraud Watch Fridays. So hopefully this inspires you. So with that, let's get into our opening topic, and that is how fraud is being combated on the local level, on the national level. When you report fraud, where does it go? Um, and this also includes ARP. What ARP is it doing about it? But also, law enforcement, state agencies, national agencies. Kay has been looking into this. What happens when you report fraud, and who's out there fighting fraud for you? So, Kay, would you like to take us away on that?
Absolutely. Thanks, Bruce. And again, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for another Fraud Watch Friday session. Last month, we talked about what steps to take if you've been scammed or you're being scammed. And of course, that included reporting the crime. But one of the most common questions we get asked when we go out and speak with groups about fraud is, what happens once I report the fraud? Is it a black hole or what happens? That's what we're going to talk about today. So, we're going to start local, regardless of where you are. I've talked with some local law enforcement agencies here in Washington state. And while agency size and reporting processes might differ across the agencies, the investigations really are very similar. Once you submit your report to your local police department, whether it's online or by phone, and the requirement does vary by agency, it's reviewed, routed to the correct county, agency, or to a specific detective or a team to essentially determine if and mainly how the case can be worked. And the actions taken at that point, of course, depend on, well, several factors, but there seem to be two that are the most prevalent. The first being the timing of your report. If the scam is reported quickly, meaning right away, and the crime has either just happened or it's happening right now, the police can potentially reach out right away to intercede. They can investigate. They can issue subpoenas for information, or they can take action to stop payment to the scammer. For example, if gift cards or wire transfers are involved. One agency told me that sometimes they can recover funds if the fraud is reported quickly so they can act quickly. And yes, the chances might be very slim, but it is possible to get a financial recovery. It has happened. However, if the scam happened weeks or months ago, there's little that the police can do other than give you a case number for your report. Any chance of a recovery is vanishingly small. And so that leads to the second factor that determines how a case can be worked locally. And it's a factor that's I found was extremely frustrating for officers I talked with. And that's staffing limitations. Take, for example, identity theft. One officer told me that there are so many identity thefts reported in Washington state, and there's only so many detectives to go around to investigate. And many times it unfortunately gets down to the dollar amount lost to determine what steps the police can take to investigate. Is it $250 lost, which is a lot of money, versus $50,000 lost? It can become a triage type process. Keep in mind as well that investigating violent crimes by our local authorities will take priority. One officer in Eastern Washington talked about the almost daily prevalence of drive-by shootings he was investigating. I was shocked. Another officer on the west side of the state is investigating a current stabbing in a nearby park along with his fraud investigations. Staffing is seemingly in short supply in every part of every department. So, even though all of the local agencies absolutely investigate fraud reports as much as possible, I found that they also have processes to report, track trends, and compare scams with other agencies. And they focus as well on public education, especially prevention, cryptocurrency, and at one department, even awareness of other alternative forms of payment that they're seeing being demanded in fraud cases there locally, such as gold. Gold. The hope is that more prevention will, of course, lead to fewer crimes and, of course, fewer reports. So, what happens when you report your fraud to a federal agency? So I want to talk briefly about the Federal Trade Commission, the FBI, and the IRS because, well, we always tell you to report to these folks, don't we? Reportfraud.ftc.gov is the central point for reporting to the Federal Trade Commission. And when you file a report online, you're given a reference number for your report. And that report information goes to the FTC's Consumer Sentinel database. The FTC then uses your report and others just like it to investigate and bring cases against the criminals. However, they can't take action or resolve reports on behalf of every individual consumer. So they're not able to respond to every individual report that's filed. Again, staffing issues versus the number of reports filed. But they use your report information in combination with those other similar reports to investigate and take action against usually groups and organizations. So your report is part of their evidence. And they do share your specific report with more than 2,800 other law enforcement partners. Just like the local agency, FTC also educates consumers about scams and how to protect themselves. So we often get asked if you can get your money back if you do report to the FTC. After you file your report, you'll be given steps to take that could help you take action as an individual to try to get your money back or stop a charge, depending on how you paid. Again, the quicker you act, the better your chance of getting your money back. Now, in some cases, an FTC law enforcement action does get money back to people. And if this happens, you would be contacted by the FTC, who would provide your original reference number that matches your report. Okay, if they don't have that number, it's likely a scam, your original reference number. So there is a possibility of recovery. So let's talk very briefly about the FBI, that's the lead federal agency for investigating crime. And of course, the Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3.gov, is the central hub where we report those frauds and scams. So once you file a report with IC3.gov, the FBI combines your information with other information to report, investigate crime, track threats and trends, and they can freeze stolen funds as they're going through their investigations. And just as importantly, IC3 shares the reports, including yours, throughout the network of FBI field offices and their law enforcement partners. Again, there's that interaction across agencies. However, we're back to staffing. Due to the massive number of complaints that they get each year, IC3 can't respond directly to every report. But your information really is being used with other like reports to investigate and work to stop the frauds. I have an example that was just announced on CNN Online this morning. The FBI worked with the San Jose, California Police Department, the U.S. State Department, and the social media company Meta, think Facebook, to take down an international sextortion ring that was targeting thousands of victims, including minors, worldwide. The lead suspect and their accomplices were arrested in their native country in West Africa, and the scheme targeted thousands of victims, including minors, at least one of whom horrifically committed suicide. These victims were located throughout the US, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Spain, and Italy. Again, the FBI working across multiple agencies and countries using the reports that have been filed for their investigations to put these criminals in jail. Our reporting does matter. Finally, we should go to the irs.gov to report any frauds that involve or impersonate the IRS. And when we report to the IRS, yep, they've got their own criminal investigation unit that's comprised of special agents trained in financial investigations. They're going to take your report plus other tips, plus information, again, from other agencies, and do their preliminary review and investigation. They're going to conduct these criminal investigations, could include audits, interviews. They can issue subpoenas for financial statements, including bank statements and records. And then they might turn that recommendation over for prosecution to local authorities to take action. So local police departments, government law enforcement sharing information, which is your report that you've just made, plus thousands of others, and they're sharing that with other agencies and investigators and officers to investigate, track trends, plus inform the public and prosecute criminals when they can. So Bruce mentioned other groups as well that are involved besides these law enforcement agencies when we report our fraud. And so private companies, organizations, what do they do? I know in Washington state, many private companies provide internal mechanisms to support their employees for reporting fraud and scams, imposter fraud, identity thefts, data breaches. And so they're supporting their employees. And I know many companies across the country absolutely do this. But you might not think about reporting your fraud with the Better Business Bureau. This is not a government agency. It's a private, nonprofit organization. They have an online scam tracker to help you with your reporting, and they put out an annual research report that's sponsored by Amazon and Capital One. Again, non-government companies. And that lists the most impersonated organizations in fraud throughout the country. When you file a report or a complaint, the Better Business Bureau is going to notify a company and they have to respond within 14 calendar days from the date you file. And if they don't respond, the BBB is going to send them a follow-up letter and continue to follow up. You'll then be notified when they do respond, and that information will be shared with you. And again, agencies working together, the Better Business Bureau shares fraud and complaint information with the Federal Trade Commission on all reports. And of course, AARP, what do we do as a private nonprofit organization? Well, we're not an investigating arm for fraud, but we're more all about giving support and guidance. And that's why I always have to throw in my pitch for the Fraud Watch helpline. If you've reported your fraud, you're at ends, at odds, you're not sure what to do, or just want to talk with somebody about it, contact the helpline at 1-877-908-3360. Leave them a message with your information, and a real person is going to call you back. And they're going to offer you information on actions that you can take. What do I do after I report the fraud? They're going to put you in touch with support, confidential in discussion groups to get emotional support with others who have been victimized. And of course, referrals to law enforcement and other agencies to investigate. So a lot of services for support through AARP. And finally, we get down to what can we do individually? If we've been victimized or even think we've been victimized by a scam, we can help protect our community by always reporting what's happened. We can and we do make a difference, and we might not get any or all or any of our lost money back. But every agency I've talked with shares report information with other law enforcement agencies, and most provide educational material to help protect us and our communities from further fraud. So is there anything else that we can do? You can encourage the victims that you might know to report using any and all methods available as quickly as possible. Don't forget about quick reporting. You can share the information that you learn about scams and the protection methods, and don't be afraid to speak up if friends are talking about potential scams. And we can support victims. We can listen, don't judge, put ourselves in their shoes. And if your friend or loved one just won't believe that they're being scammed, which happens way too often, you can contact a family member. Ask the police, your local police, to talk with them. I've been told by officers that they do this often with many current victims, or perhaps have them talk with their clergy or a trusted college colleague. Open communication without judgment. Or what if they just don't want to go to the trouble of reporting because they think it just won't make a difference? Hey, share today's information with them so they can see that it does make a difference. So, Bruce, it's a common theme. After reporting, then there's investigation using our information along with other reports, sharing across agencies and groups, as well as educating communities about fraud. And I think that this is something that we really need to continue to do as the Fraud Watch Network, letting people know that things really do happen when they report a fraud. So hopefully, if you have questions, you'll put your questions in the chat for us. And I want to let you know as well that with the survey that goes out after today's session, we're going to include a sheet, a document that you can download and save or print out that's going to have all of those contact numbers and all of that information available to where you don't feel like you have to remember who do I go to for what. It's going to have all that listed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All the information that is in the chat there that'll be in the follow-up document, as along with some other information. And Kay, we've got some questions coming in, which is great.
Okay.
DM, hi there, DM. Good to see you back. Um, and the question is there a checklist for victims on what to do and what records to keep in terms of reporting fraud? That is a very good question. So,
That's a terrific question, and there are several sources where you can get some of that information. If you go to on social media on Facebook or YouTube and pull up last month's the April Fraud Watch Friday, that's exactly what we talked to. If you've been victimized by a fraud, here's what you can do. Here's the documents you're going to want to pull together. Here's who you're going to want to talk to. Also, go to aarp.org and they have that information available as well in a bulleted list describing who you should contact, what documents you should keep. So it's very detailed. And then, if you feel like you need more information, just go to your web browser and say, I'm the victim of a scam. What do I do next? And believe me, you're going to get way more information than you would ever want to see. But those two original sources are really helpful, especially aarp.org. Very helpful.
great, great. Thank you, Kay. Kat asks, who may I contact regarding postal service law enforcement issues and to report a crime?
Yep, USPS.gov. And so that is going to give you an opportunity to report fraud. I can tell you from conferences, financial fraud conferences I've been to nationally, the postal inspectors that work across the US to investigate fraud, they are frighteningly efficient. They are extremely serious about postal fraud. So, yes, go to USPS and you'll be able to report that. And believe me, they want to know.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I would also comment on that. ARP and the Fraud Watch Network and Washington State Office have kind of a long association with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, and we got to know them a little bit when we first started doing fraud work. And of course, I did not know that they had their own law enforcement, and I think that kind of bothers them because they do take their enforcement duties very, very seriously. They are very hardcore, and I've heard they have the highest success rate in terms of solving cases of like any law enforcement agency. But they do have a narrow focus.
Yeah.
They focus on any crime that happens through the mail. And it can be kind of tangential, but if it involves mail, they are on it. So I would definitely contact them. Yeah, because they want to solve crimes and be taken seriously. It's very impressive.
They're
Um,
like the Internal Revenue Service. They have, as I mentioned, their own investigative division for the IRS and highly trained financial investigations. But these folks carry a badge, they carry firearms. These are serious people that are out there working to catch the bad guys on our behalf, and very much like the postal inspectors.
Yeah, yeah. I mentioned in the chat that I have a neighbor who was an IRS enforcement agent, and he was telling me he needed to go over to our police station in the neighborhood and do his firearm training. And I go, firearm training? You work for the IRS, and that's what I found out that they conduct the armed raids and are knocking down people's doors. So a lot of these agencies do have their own law enforcement, like they don't rely on the FBI or other agencies to do their enforcement. So if you have a fraud that has to do with taxes or it has to do with the mail, it's definitely worthwhile to report to these specialized agencies who will probably get on a little faster than a more generalized
Sure.
enforcement.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's see. Kim actually mentions who works for the Office of the Insurance Commissioner, and thank you again for joining us. That she has a link there to report fraud, especially Medicare fraud, but I guess any insurance-related fraud, hopefully, Kim, to the Insurance Commissioner. Um, so that's a good source of advice. Um, Dan mentions beware of recovery scams. That's a very good point. The more you Google, Facebook, or use social media, the more likely someone will try to convince you that they can get your money back. And boy, we have seen that as a cycle. Gene mentions these are called reload scams, and they are real. Kay, could you talk about that a little bit?
They are absolutely real. And many times, if not most frequently, if you've been victimized by a scam and lost money, it's not too much longer before you're then contacted by one of these recovery companies are going to be able to help you get your money back because they have a fantastic success rate at recovery from scams. There are some legitimate companies out there that do this. They charge for their services. You have to be extremely careful and do research with these companies. What are they going to do for you? AARP has found that mostly they're just going to send letters and documents to the same people that you've already reported to. They're not really an investigative type company. They're just going to repeat your actions. You might as well do it yourself and save your money. But the tough part is that if you're victimized by a fraud, and then contacted by a company. Many times it's the same fraudsters or a group working in conjunction with that fraudulent group um, to say, we realize and see that you've lost money. We can help you for a fee. And of course, now you're paying money to fraudsters again. You're being victimized a second time. So your best bet, always follow the reporting, keep your documents, follow up. And I might add that a couple of the police officers that I talked with individually really mentioned the idea that as you gather those documents that we talked about, finding the list a moment ago, as you gather your documents and you're involved and talking with the police, you know, if the police ask you if you can help them, you're going to move your case along much more quickly. For example, one officer mentioned that if he has to go to the bank to get your records about, a bad check, money withdrawn that was then for fraud, anything that might involve gathering information that is actually covered by banking privacy regulations. In order for the police to get that, they've got to stop, get a subpoena, go to the bank for that specific information. Need something else? Stop, go to the bank, go to get the subpoena, go back to the bank. Whereas if they ask you to step in and say, could you go to your bank and get this list of documents? It's your account, it's your information. The bank has to give it to you. You've saved time. Again, there's some things that you can do to help yourself. That's kind of a tangent, Bruce, sorry. But I can tell you that the officer was quite passionate about that point.
Yeah. Actually, the one thing that occurs to me, and that is great advice because, time is of the essence if you want to get your money back, because often by a certain point, it's gone. It's converted to crypto. currency, it's moved overseas. And, if you can stop the fraud before the money gets out of your financial institution, for example, that is your best hope of recovering your money. And a lot of frauds are stopped that way. And, banks are getting more and more helpful in terms of stopping transactions. One thing I would mention, a common scam is fraudsters contacting you claiming to be law enforcement or claiming to be government agents, and they need you to transfer your money, all your money, out of your account into an account that they've set up for safekeeping, and they're going to hold your money and then transfer it back when their investigation is complete. That is a terrible scam because obviously they're not going to transfer anything back,
Right.
and you have lost all your money.
Mhm.
And that's something that pops up. Law enforcement will not ask you to move your money to some other account. That is an insidious scam and so tragic when people get involved in that.
Mhm.
Um, Tricia asks, can you use these agencies to report deceptive practices? For example, receiving a letter from a company indicating that homeowners need to confirm ownership of property and need to pay the company for that service.
Um, yes. The short answer is yes, you can. The Federal Trade Commission, they investigate not only the frauds and the scams but they report, but deceptive and fraudulent business practices. And so if you file a report, and you do have to, for the FTC, you do have to file online. You can't call them to describe what happened, but you described in great detail. They ask you a lot of questions online, what's happened, and you can even attach examples of what you've received. You can report that to the FTC. If there's something that happens with like email or your cell phone that is a deceptive practice, the Federal Communications Commission, FCC.gov, is an organization, federal investigative arm that works very closely with the Federal Trade Commission. They work specifically with those communication type devices, any fraud, any deceptive practices. And again, if you're getting something from them through the mail, USPS.gov, send it to them as well. So there are opportunities to report. And again, if you get that type of letter, anything through the mail indicating that we need to confirm ownership of your property, well, that in itself sounds ridiculous because you can go online and see who owns the property. But, go to your mortgage company through a separate number that you get that you know is valid and let them know that this type of thing is happening.
Great. Diane asked a question that is a very good question. Do you think it is worthwhile to invest in a monthly service that will scrub your info off the internet?
So, if, if sorry, Diana, I don't mean to laugh because just like a few days ago, I went online and I just Googled myself, and it was pretty horrifying. And of course, all the Fraud Watch Friday videos are there on YouTube and AARP and LinkedIn and Facebook and everything, all the things you'd usually see. Um, it's really up to you, in my thought, to go in to scrub the internet. Um, and what does that even mean? Scrub the internet of anything that refers to you for your information. Google Earth, your address and the picture of your home is there. How are you going to scrub that off? Um, your phone number, your address. I'm sure that what the main worry is like your phone number and your social security number, that personal information. There are services that say they will do that for you. I would highly research those services. Um, to see if that's of value and if they're legitimate, especially. But if you go into your browser, there's privacy settings that you can set. I get emails from Google saying that, my information has been found on Google. Google search. I've been searched. And I'll go in and it was like my neighbor was researching addresses in our neighborhood for some reason. And then I asked Google to take it off of there. There was no charge. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities there. You know, Andy Meyer is with us today on our call. And Andy, I know that you're kind of our cyber tech expert when it comes to all things internet and cyber. And I see that you took your audio, put that back on. What do you think about scrubbing from the internet? Because we know we're probably already on the dark web and we're not going to scrub that. So does it matter?
That's the problem.
Yeah.
So those things are useful, particularly so there are sites that make money off of putting, they like having people with felony reports and they like putting the picture up of from the arrest record, mostly so that they can make money for taking it back down. So the scrubbing services can work for that.
Ah,
If you are worried about attacks, those are mostly going to be corporate breaches of databases are going to be taken off of private websites and they're going to be put on the dark web. And you're not going to scrub those because those are sold again and again and again to scammers who want populations, people to scam. And you're not going to pay to take those off because those are not so easy to find. And you wouldn't know if they've been on or off anyway. So I think ultimately, from a scamming viewpoint, it probably doesn't do a lot of good.
mhm.
It might do good from a people are seeing you or your face or things like that, and you'd rather not on normally available websites. There it might work, but that's not a scamming issue. That's more a you like your personal privacy from your neighbors kind of issue.
Right. Yeah, I kind of think of it in terms of like whack-a-mole. You know, I pay money to this company to go out and take action. And, this time next month, it's all over again. You know, Wh- yeah, I
Yeah, yeah. I'd follow up on what Andy said about the dark web. We actually have a video with a guy who was one of the first to use the dark web for criminal activity. And he showed us some of what you can find on there and how easy it is. And it's completely unregulated. And I put the link to, I think, I'm sorry if I added some extra sound there. I was trying to find the video. But it's, you just feel like there's no way you can scrub the internet of yourself and feel confident that you are protected. Really, our best advice is you have to assume that your information is out there, um, and kind of defend yourself accordingly. And we have a lot of tips for that, how to be careful of the right things and how not to trust the wrong things. And I think that's a more fruitful way to protect yourself than to pay a service that will never really 100% protect you, even if they do help. I will also say that I Google myself and I'm very disappointed in the results. I'm not very famous. And there is an Air Force general who shares my name who is very prominent and he gets all the Google returns. So, so I'm disappointed for the opposite reason. Not that you can find a lot of information about me, but that you can't. Um,
You
so
better
anyway,
have a name,
um,
John Smith.
the DM mentions, will ARP consider schedule with TV news to share to a weekly audience? We would love to, but that's on the TV news, and in this day and age, it's harder and harder to get on TV because of the shortage of local reporters. But I will say that Kay has been on local news in both Seattle and Spokane in the last 6 months. So we do try, and when something comes up in the news, we are absolutely ready, to send one of our Fraud Watch spokespeople out there. So Kay, thank you for doing that. But that is a great way to reach people. Unfortunately, it's out of our control to get on TV. I wish we could. Um, let's see, we got a couple of good suggestions. Um, actually, this is a good point. Kim mentions clearing out your cache
Mm-hmm.
on the internet and your computer and your login info. Kay, could you talk a little bit about what Kim is talking about there?
Yeah. So yeah, it's your history of all the places that you've been. Your browser is going to automatically keep track of that. Your operating system, and you can go in and set that to every time you log off of your device, all of that history is deleted. Or you can just go in every so often and delete, which is what I tend to do. I'm kind of lazy about that. But you can also do the same with your passwords in terms of for the sites that you access, that you go on. Like I have a couple of sites for set up for my husband that are non they're very docile. They're not informational. So he doesn't have to log on every time. But when I go out and clear all my caches for all my history and everything that's happened on the computer, I have to go back in and log into his sites, or he'll go and he say, I can't, something's wrong with the computer because I can't get in. So you have to be aware that when you're clearing the cache out of your device, that you're clearing everything, which, yeah, that might help in terms of somebody tracking what you're doing if your device is compromised. But you need to remember that you do that. Andy, what do you think?
Um, I think I think it can help. I'm not sure it makes a great deal of difference because I think the real question there is how much information leaks. It is definitely true that if you're filling something in, it will automatically fill things in for you, and you might not have wanted to fill that in, and that it'll definitely protect against. Some browsers are more privacy oriented in terms of what they allow in terms of trappers and running code. If I would say the first thing to be doing would be to choose a browser that is much more privacy oriented than some of the ones that are focused a little bit more on advertising revenue. Um, that can help, but ultimately, I don't think that's a big source of attacks.
Hmm, makes sense. Any other
Yeah,
questions, Bruce?
yeah. Actually, Dan and DM both mentioned contacting your elected officials to advocate for tougher privacy laws and for more fraud protection. And that's a little segue. I was just going to give people an update on the cryptocurrency AATM bill that we talked about. I think it was in February. And that unfortunately did not pass. It died in the legislature. Seemed like a very common sense measure to help protect consumers. And if you recall that, or you weren't on the session, what it was a bill to provide consumer protections along the line of what bank ATMs provide, in the sense that they're required to give you a paper receipt. There are daily limits on how much you can take out, things of that nature. Also a limit on fees, and all these things in the crypto world, which is completely unregulated, but they look like ATM machines, and people think, of course, that they act like ATM machines, but they're charging 15 to 25% of your transaction as a transaction fee. A lot of them do not give you a receipt, so you have no proof of your transaction. And we were trying to get, I believe it was $1,000 daily limit, and the companies were insisting on a $10,000 daily limit or $15,000 daily limit. I don't know who needs to trade $15,000 worth of cryptocurrency per day to a machine. Like to a machine that's in a drugstore or is in a gas station. I mean, if you're trading that level of crypto, you should probably do it from home on a secure, computer network. So anyway, that seemed like I thought that was going to be an easy thing to pass. It turned out it was not. So that just shows, that we need people to get involved in advocating for, common sense consumer protections, and that's always ongoing. And if you're interested in that, please send us an email at arpwa@arp.org, and we can connect you to our advocacy. on these sorts of things. But you're right. A lot of it we can't do ourselves. We need, our state and local governments to help us out. Um,
I would say also on the crypto ATM bill as well, Bruce, that this is something that will be sponsored, or the AARP Washington will be pushing to be sponsored again, to be reintroduced next session, and that the the difficulty in getting that bill passed was the very strong lobby of the companies that own and run those kiosks, those machines. Very vociferous, very vocal. And so anything, if you're interested in seeing that pass, again, contact that site that Bruce mentioned, because as that comes up again, which it will, this next session, the more voices we can have into the legislature, the better, because that's what the legislators listen to is their constituents.
yeah, and I would also add that this is a national effort from ARP, and we are sponsoring legislations in many states. And I think all states are trying. I believe that Oklahoma passed a bill, but they had to accept a $10,000 daily limit to get that bill passed. So it's an uphill fight, but it's a great fight to be in. And, these are just common sense protections, I think, although I'm not an expert on the issue. So I would add that. But we need these kind of protections to stop people from losing large amounts of money, from losing their life savings, because it is a common tactic for scammers to try to get your money converted to crypto as quickly as possible so that they can, transfer it somewhere else and it's not traceable, etc. So it's an important issue and we are trying to make a difference. All right. Brenda says, I occasionally get an email notifying me that my passwords are on the internet. Long ago, I actually looked to see what they were talking about, and there really were some of my passwords. How is that possible?
I guess I have several questions and thoughts about that. In terms of, how were you notified? Did you get an email that directed you to a website to look? Was that email and website legitimate? If it was, where did you look on the internet? Where was it saved? It just seems a little strange that your passwords were there. Maybe your device wasn't as protected as it could have been, and so that you had some malware on your device that was tracking your keystrokes. I don't know. Without more information, I would say that if you had that notification, I would hope that you would go in and immediately change not just your passwords that were notified that they were found somewhere, but that you went in and changed all of your passwords for everything, updated your security software, made sure that the security on your browser was up to date, on your operating system was up to date with the most recent patches and updates. For long ago, I don't know if maybe you've seen that since or not. Um,
Can I step in there for a second?
yes, yeah, sure.
So I use a monitoring system in order to track everything that is about me on the web. And passwords show up on occasion. The main source of it, because I use a different password for absolutely everything, I can look at the password and find out who leaked it. The usual source is a breach of a company where the entire database of users has been taken and the company was in my just incredibly negligent in that they stored open passwords.
Mhm.
Any company should be using what's called a hash of a password, which means they take your password, they run it through a hash, and then they get a number, and they can check that your password is there by running through the hash. If they don't store it that way, if they store it as open text and they're breached, then your password is now available on the dark web. And that happens fairly frequently. It's got, in my case, I'm quite sure it has nothing to do with me, but I can see which companies are not taking security seriously because they allowed my password to get stolen open source. The main part there is a different password for absolutely every place you go to, and just understand that some of them are going to get taken. And that's because the company that you gave it to wasn't taking security seriously.
Mhm.
And Diane follows up. What is your system for monitoring your activity? And kind of before I let Andy answer, I do just want to put out the caveat that ARP does not endorse any particular
Mhm.
product, especially for personal security. But there are a lot of reputable companies that provide services. And we encourage you to do your own research on that. You can sort of tell which ones are legit. But having said that, Andy, do you have an answer you could give Diane?
I think you just hit it. I think that choose your favorite search engine and look, my usual will be password security review, something along that line, and then spend a little time to find one. I like mine, but I think it's one of many that are legitimate and good.
Yeah. And then, that's a good transition to another question was how safe is it to use password saving apps? Or should I go back to saving my own in a notebook?
And a lot of password saving apps, password managers, um, are generally pretty safe. However, there is the option of, just like every other company, a data breach at a password manager. As Andy said, the idea being that that password manager encrypts your data. I know a while back there was a lot of news about the password manager LastPass being breached. And that actually came about as a result of an employee accessing the company from his computer at home without the actual security software that he was supposed to use. It was something that was not intentional, but did happen. But LastPass did not lose any password information of their users. So again, password managers can be very, very helpful. It's just like the password tracking. You can go online and look at several companies to see which might suit your needs. Really soft, or rather strong master password to access your account to set that up. A lot of people use them. I have my passwords in a notebook. A lot of people like to write them down. They like to have a password manager and everything in between. The key is, as Andy said, different password for every account. Do not reuse them. Strong passwords, and don't share those with anybody else, even if it's just your Netflix password. Give it to my kids so they can go watch movies. And if it's the same password as my bank account, not a good idea. You get the idea.
And I'll just point out that you have two choices with password managers, one of which something like what you mentioned, where the passwords are held at the company site. And there are other password managers where the password manage all the database is stored on your computer, which
Mhm.
means you control it. So if you want a password manager, but you're the I want it myself in my own notebook kind of person, you can choose one where it's stored locally and that keeps the corporate breaches from happening, assuming you can keep your computer from being breached.
And that would be the key. Because again, you're kind of trading one risk for another risk, which is what you have to make that judgment about, compared to your notebook.
Yeah. I actually was slow to adopt the password manager model, and actually, one of our other Fraud Watch volunteers, Dave, if you saw his presentation on password managers that we did, I think it was last spring, and I finally came around to it. He convinced me, and also the guy who's featured in the YouTube video that I posted, who's the dark web con man. I asked him that question. And he said he uses a password manager and he thinks they're worthwhile. So I came around to it. Part of it is because, experts that I trusted told me it was okay. But also, if you use your passwords on your phone, on your tablet, you can sync those across your devices. And, as we get more and more apps and, more and more passwords, and like as Andy says, you have a different password for every function, you can't remember them all. So it's kind of a convenience thing. Um, but also realizing these companies can get hacked and your passwords can be exposed, and then you have to take action. You have to follow the advice that comes out from the companies. Probably involves changing all your passwords as soon as possible. That's an advantage of using one of the prominent ones. Is that if there is a breach and you're paying attention, as you should be as fraud fighters, you will hear about it, and then there will be guidance on what to do. But absolutely, you should not keep a list on your computer where somebody could hack into it and find it, or a paper list where it could be lost. There's no way that's 100% certain, but we can be pretty close. But the fight against fraud is ongoing. So, well, we are coming up to 11:30. So, thank you for all your questions today. Really appreciate it. It's been a great discussion. I'm just going through the chat one more time to see if there's anybody I missed. If I did, I apologize. But I'm scrolling, and if you have oh, there's somebody who's that's it. There's just saying that they thought the presentation was excellent. Well, Kay and Andy. Thank you. You're the ones who provide all the information. Um, but our next Fraud Watch Friday is going to be on June 20th. So our colleague Itzmar just put the link to register. If you want to go there right now and sign up, then you won't have to think about it. And we'll see you at 10:30 on the third Friday of the month, which is June 20th next month. And that'll also be in the follow-up email where we'll send out the um, reference information and links, etc. But you can sign up then as well. And our topic are going to be top three frauds. We're going to be talking about Social Security, tax fraud. Kay, can you remind me of the third one?
Let's see, Social Security, the current text frauds that are just exploding, as well as how is AI enabling these frauds? AI-enabled fraud is number one on the Experian list of
Yeah,
frauds for 2025, and it's right at the top for AARP as well. So we'll talk about all three of those points.
great. That'll be a good presentation. And if you'd like a topic that you'd like us to cover, go ahead and put it in the chat or send us an email. As always, we kind of reserve the second half of this for general questions, so you don't have to ask questions about the topic. I maybe should have explained that a little bit more. But we do have a topic to start off with. Let's see. I also wanted to mention a couple of other events that are not fraud events, but I thought since you're here, I will tell you about them very quickly. We are doing a series of Social Security events. Does not involve fraud. It's just information about Social Security. And we have one coming up on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. At 10:30, we have our national lead fraud educator, or not fraud educator. Sorry, I got fraud in the brain. Our lead Social Security educator is joining us in Washington to do a presentation, kind of like the fraud ones, in the sense that he will present some information that he thinks that we need to know, and then take questions. So that's coming up on Tuesday, and I believe the first topic will be Social Security and work. How much you can earn, things of that nature. So kind of the intersection between Social Security and work and earned income. And then there are two other sessions in that series. One is on love and marriage and family. So, claiming your spouse's benefits, things to do with ex-spouses and children and things of that nature. And then we have a third one too, but that'll be in June or July, so we'll worry about that then. But check that out at the link. Also, we've got a brain health event that I'm very excited about. We are partnering with the Allen Institute for Brain Science. If you're in Seattle, you've probably heard of them, but that's the Paul Allen funded institute for basic brain science. And so we're excited to be partnering with them. And we're going to be talking about healthy aging and the brain and the science that they have developed. And one of their lead researchers is going to be presenting. We also have a presenter from the University of Washington Brain and Memory Institute. So that should be very interesting. And then also AARP's national expert again, and we have to take advantage of our national experts. AARP's national expert on brain health policy will be joining us to present the wealth of information that AARP has in more the lifestyle realm and the intersection of healthy aging tips. So we're going to learn some brain science and some practical ways to talk about Alzheimer's and dementia and cognitive issues, but also how to keep your brain sharp into old age. So I'm excited about that. That is a new partnership, and I think that's going to be pretty interesting. Where do I register for the Social Security meeting? Cassidy asked. I put the link there, but I'll put it under your question. Um, I think there's also a page for the whole series. If you can find that, it's more and put it in the chat. Um,
I will include all the links in the post-event email.
yeah. So, and you can go to our general webpage, which is aarp.org/WA, so short for Washington, and you can find out what we're doing generally. The Brenda asks, can you donate brain upon death? I don't know if that's part of the presentations, but that would be a great question. Because
Yeah.
I know the Allen Institute would like your brain, and I'm sure the University of Washington also would like to have your brain. And actually, I was down there talking with them about the event, and they have a partnership that maybe I should let them describe because it involves living brain tissue. So come and find out what they do with that because that's a good question, and it's very interesting. I mean, they're doing, world-class research there. Um, so you can sign up for that now. Did I give the date? I probably didn't, but that's on June 5th. So would love to see you there for that. And that doesn't have anything to do with fraud. That is brain health. So with that, did anybody have any last words? Kay, Andy?
Yep. Yep. Thank you for joining us, everybody. And we'll look forward to seeing you hopefully next month. And what was that date again, Bruce?
Let's see, for Fraud Watch Friday is June 20th.
June 20th. Perfect. We'll
So
look
look forward to seeing you all back here again.
absolutely. Thank you
So
so
thank you, everyone, and have a great Friday.
much.
Hi, everyone.